fifth and sixth grade. It's your teacher. It's Mr. Pedigo, live and in person. I know, you just hoped and dreamed for the day that I finally start making YouTube videos again. And guess what? Today's the day. And we're reading the story of a gentleman named Odysseus, sometimes called Ulysses. Very famous Greek legend. Okay, this happens during the time of the Trojan War. We finished reading part 1. You did. And I thought that it would be interesting to read part 2 together. You can read along, you can do whatever. I'm going to try to make some comments about this because the purpose of this exercise is to think about, okay, what sort of things did the Greeks value in life? What sort of character traits? What sort of lessons do they have to teach us? Whether it be symbolic lessons or very plain lessons about how to live one's life. And we're trying to better understand Grecian culture. So let's jump right into part 2, page 46. I'm going to be reading this out loud and giving a little commentary. So buckle your seatbelt in, buckaroo. The land they reached was an island on which Aeolus, the god of the winds, had his home. Aeolus treated Odysseus very kindly. The west wind, which could carry the ships to Ithaca in 9 days, the gods left free. He tied up all other winds in a stout leather bag, which he gave to Odysseus. Odysseus then bade farewell to Aeolus. For some time everything went well. One day, however, while Odysseus slept, his crew untied the windbag. I wonder if that's the origin of the term windbag, probably not. Hoping to find money in it. As soon as the winds were set free, they blew the ships back to the island of Aeolus, who drove them off. He thought that the gods were angry with him. Okay, so this is an example of people through myths trying to explain some of the dangers of, traveling on the sea. Wind patterns are unpredictable. People's navigational skills at the time were not nearly what they are today. This is them trying to explain those kind of dangers through a story. The fleet next reached an island where there were cannibals of great size and strength. They broke up all the ships except the one Odysseus himself commanded, and they feasted on the sailors. That's a problem. That would be a real party pooper, Cannibals are never fun. Odysseus made his escape on a single ship. That also tells you that somewhere in Greece they have to have some kind of understanding of what cannibals are. Is that telling us that maybe there's some island that travelers in ancient Greece were familiar with that did have cannibals on it? He made an escape on a single ship with those of his men that were left. He soon arrived on yet another island, on which at some distance from the shore he saw a marble palace in the middle of a grove. He sent 22 men under his charge of his trusty captain, Eurylochus, to ask for food. When his captain reached the palace, he was met by a troop of lions, tigers, and wolves. This is not the Wizard of Oz. Don't get it confused. Which capered about and fawned upon him, and his men as so many playful puppies or kittens might do. So these wild animals are all, happy. They put Eurylochus on his guard. I'm pronouncing that wrong, I'm sorry. He made up his mind at once to tell the palace. He could tell us that the palace was home of a wizard or a witch. At the palace gate he inquired, "Who dwells in here? We are strangers." "Welcome," said a voice from within. "Welcome to the palace of the sun god's daughter. The best that is here shall be yours." But this was the voice of an enchantress called Circe. It was her delight to turn men into brutes. The lions, tigers, and wolves that had met Eurylochus were really men who had once sat at her table and drunk her enchanted wine. Eurylochus refused to eat, but then the men who were with him were gluttonous. You guys know what gluttonous is? It's like one of the 7 deadly sins where you can't stop eating. You have no self-control. They ate greedily and drank deeply. When the feast was at its height, Circe touched them with her wand and changed them into hogs. That's sort of symbolic, don't you think? If somebody is greedy, gluttonous, etc., oftentimes it's symbolized as being piggish or hoggish. So that's a literal example of a symbol in this story, which we've been talking a lot about. Eurylochus returned to the ship and told what had happened. Odysseus then hastened to Circe's palace. On the way, Hermes met him. So a god named Hermes, a Greek god, who is the god of travel, okay, met with him and walked with him for some distance. As they passed through a wood, the god plucked some flowers of a plant called moly and gave them to Odysseus. "Smell them," said Hermes, "while Circe is talking to you, and especially when you drink the enchanted wine." So he's trying to find a way to keep his wits about him, because otherwise he's going to get #enchanted, which will be a problem for him getting home. When he reached the palace, the hero was welcome, and his comrades had been. Circe put a golden cup full of wine into his hand. Oh! Odysseus took the cup and drained it. He's like, taking care all the while to smell the moly that Hermes had given him in the wood. When the cup was empty, the enchantress tapped the hero with her wand and said, "Now turn into a pig and join your grunting companions." Weird. Unchanged, however, Odysseus drew his sword and cried, "Wicked enchantress, you have no power over me. The gods have sent me here to punish you, and you shall die." But here's the thing. Odysseus was not sent there by the gods literally. He was fated to be there. He was, this is because of this storm that happened. He wouldn't be at this island of the sun god's daughter had it not been for, fate. And so, but he says the God sent me to do this. So he's kind of he's taking on sort of a figure of justice, of divine justice. He's kind of answering the call. He knows that his fate. He's kind of going with the flow here. He's serving justice, even though he was not directly sent by the gods. He gets that fate is the will of the Greek gods. Important lesson. "I will undo what I've done if you will spare me," she cried. So Odysseus followed her to the sty, where she touched the swine, one by one, with her magic wand. As each was touched, he was changed back to a man. Next, the troop of lions, tigers, and wolves were touched, and they too were quickly changed back to men. The other Greeks were then called from the ships, and Circe gave them a feast. After this, Odysseus remained on her island for a whole year. Strange, Odysseus. That's a weird thing to do. When at last he was going to sail, the enchantress gave him some good advice. On the homeward way, he and his men would have to pass close to the Isle of the Sirens, as the Argonauts had done long before them. "To sail by the Sirens' Isle safely," said Circe, "let the men fill their ears with wax and lash you to the mast when the ship draws near the isle." Odysseus and his men then left Circe's island, and they drew near to the Sirens' Isle. Odysseus made the sailors fill their ears with wax and lash them to the mast. They rowed past the Sirens. Sweet music came over him of the waters. "Loose me!" Odysseus cried to the sailors. "Loosely I must go near the music." But the sailors rowed on. They could hear neither him nor the song of the Sirens. You don't have this part, but I'm going to read it anyway. It's just the last couple of sentences. "Slaves!" cried Odysseus. "Loose me!" But the sailors rowed on. The music grew fainter and fainter, and at last it died away, and the vessel was out of danger. Then the men took the wax from their ears and loosened the cords about their chief, a.k.a. Odysseus. Now the Sirens are very similar. You can think of them this way, at least, as being similar to a mermaid, okay? They're these figures of myth and legend, especially in Grecian times, where they would go out there and they would sing beautiful music that sailors on the high seas could not resist. And they would end up dying at sea because they were so just enchanted they had to go and wanted to go with the Sirens, and they would never come home. Think about these things, and I want to have a conversation on this, the lessons that the story of Odysseus teaches us, and what stories it possibly taught the ancient Greeks. So we'll read the final part 3 next time we see each other. Peace.